Greg, can you hear me?
I can. Why is this thing in the middle of my screen? There you go. Yeah, and sorry, I know I owe you a call back. I've been
Get
scrambling
right on that.
a little bit here. How are you today?
I am here. I wouldn't say I'm busy or super excited about things, but it's lumber's interesting right now. How are you doing?
Good. It's always something.
Ashley, you at home or are you downtown?
I'm downtown. I don't have the screen behind me today. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm curious. In Chicago, is the downtown area like basically vacant? Like in Portland, I can drive downtown here after we were done with our thing. I could leave and I could just drive 5 minutes to downtown Portland and just find any parking spot I want. Place is empty. It's a ghost town.
Well,
I don't know why that would be. It's like
well, let's not talk about that. But I'm just curious. Is Chicago like that? No. Portland's gone downhill, buddy. I mean, like the city of Portland, the downtown corridor has gone. It's vacant. It's weird. It's like a ghost town. It's just quiet. Is Chicago like that? Is the Miracle Mile boarded up, or is it humming?
No, downtown is booming. It's crazy how busy it is down there. It's wild.
I was telling my wife coming home on the train in the last 2 weeks, trains are full. Somebody just asked, "Can't you take an Antifa member to lunch?"
Hey! Ash, before we get going, I want to just say, we got a lot of feedback last week. We went a little off the rail. I went a little off the rails, got a little political. We had a lot of feedback, and very varying degrees. And I appreciated that. But I think it's important sometimes when we have a policy issue that directly affects our industry that we should highlight it. And so here I go. Student loan fiasco part 2. Think about the perverse effect of saddling young people with debt that ultimately prevents them from achieving the American dream. There's a big article about we've created this next generation of renters that are never going to be able to buy homes. And it's created this whole industry of big businesses that buy whole subdivisions that they're ultimately going to rent out. That is going to have a direct impact on our industry as we move forward.
So I had a conversation with a person the other day about it. That's pretty high up the food chain, and their comment was they're not as high up as you are, Greg, but they were pretty high up there. And their theory is that we're now seeing 2008, 9, and 10. We saw about 0% of these big companies buying single-family homes. Do you have about 15% now? His theory is at some point you're going to see 50%, because in theory, that's a monetary flow that hasn't been has been exposed now, and now they're consolidating that, right? Home builders, institutions buying it, and like you said, all of a sudden, next thing, everybody's renting everything, right? And
I just an article about Jeff Bezos, who's backing a company called Arrived Homes. Have you read about this? So they're gonna have a fractional ownership model of homes. That's one way for institutions to get into the housing market, and then there's another way, which is rent to own strategies that are now popping up. So a developer comes in and puts up 100 houses, and then they rent them out, but with the idea the first 2 years of payments will be applied to the down payment of the house. It's sort of a rent to own business model. I mean, it all stems from the idea that housing costs have kind of gone up a lot. 20% in 2021, 20% in 2022. We know that's not sustainable in the long run. You can't have 20% year over year gains in any commodity. And housing is a commodity, like Greg says. How many homes are for sale? All of them. We're finding that out right now, right? So it will be interesting to see where housing goes in this country. But when Jeff Bezos is setting aside billions of dollars to buy the dip, I mean, what does that tell you, right?
Well, think about it. He can put refrigerators in that if you take your milk out, all of a sudden it sends an email or a direct message to Amazon and to Whole Foods to you in theory will be renting a house, but inside of it will be all this technology that monitors everything you do, and everything will be a la carte when you want to do something.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for like when you're walking places and it does the retina and targets the ad directly to you, right? I mean, I think that's cool. But, I'm just not, as long as no one else can see what's being targeted at me, because that might get creepy.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's fire this up. Welcome, everybody, to This Week in Lumber with Matt Beamer and Greg Riley. Greg Riley's from Sitka, USA. Matt Beamer from Hampton Lumber Sales. We talk about the weekly events in lumber, housing, and we merge the political sphere with what's going on in our housing market. So let's talk a little bit about last week when we talked. We had the conversation where I was out of it a bit, and boy, we sold off a little bit last week. We're coming into this week. It seems to be, and Greg, you're talking to you this morning, that there's still liquidity. But we had this question that we brought up: what does housing look like? Because obviously the level of what we're building new homes at, selling them at, is starting to pull back today. And what report did we have today? Was it employment or was it payroll? It was payroll, and it seems to be, from what I read about the payroll, if it wasn't for bartenders and people working in restaurants, that wouldn't have looked so well. It's so good today.
Yeah, you get unemployment report on Friday for August, so that'll be interesting also.
So let's talk about
Matt. Where do you want to start? You want to talk about the current cash market? What do you want to talk? What do you want to think? What do you think?
I mean, I can talk about. I was kind of more in a listening mood this week because the current cash market isn't super exciting. So if you want to talk about something that's not super exciting, let's go ahead and talk about it. But we're in the
Matt,
final days
along that line,
of August here, right?
Your primary markets are like Texas, Southwest, mountain areas. Is that a fair characterization?
Pretty much, yeah. The western half.
Lots of markets, right?
Mainly the western half of the United States, the upper Midwest, the center part of the state, west of the Mississippi.
The reason why I bring that up is, like my reports are that those areas are the slowest in the country. And you probably get that from your sales floor also.
We are, if you look at the western markets, so some of the bigger western markets in the last 2 years have been places like Phoenix and Boise and Dallas that have just kind of exploded, right? I mean, the frenzy for real estate in those markets was worse than, say, Portland, Oregon. And so now things are slowing down. Part of it is just economics, and part of it's weather. And Texas has had a lot of rain recently, and so that's not helping to keep the flow of material at the same rate that it was in June or July. There's a lot of rain down there, which they need. It'll probably help with the refilling of the reservoirs and whatnot in Texas, but in the short term, it makes for lots of muddy conditions, and job sites get pushed back and all that kind of stuff that happens when it rains in Texas for any length of time. So I would say the western markets are okay, but I mean, we've been, like you talked about before, Greg, we've been prepared for this. We knew that slower conditions were coming, and now they're here. So we'll just see how the rest of the year plays out. I fully expect at this point with the price of lumber going down below production cost, that you're going to start to see more and more curtailment announcements as we move into September and October.
So, I mean, I was having this discussion with somebody today. So if we're talking about curtailment, you know, I mean, the history of the business is that curtailment comes like it's a lot longer than we think, quote unquote. And I guess, you know, my hard thing is like, so if mills are going to curtail, it's because there's not the business there to support the prices. So, you know, what am I going to do?
Mills curtail because
am I going to buy a lot of inventory?
No, I would say that that's the problem, right? I mean, people have inventory right now, and so if your mill inventory starts to grow, and then your log costs remain high, your labor costs remain high, and your cost of production remains high, then it becomes a much easier decision to take some time off. So, you know, that's usually what happens with curtailments is inventories, and so when inventories back up the mill, that's where it becomes critical. If the mills can keep moving their inventory, then they'll keep running until the red ink becomes too big to handle.
Do you have any sense, Matt, on how much, you know, we saw the shipment numbers, you know, I think through the first quarter. I don't think we have the first half numbers, but you know, production and shipment were down in Canada, specifically BC, and I'm wondering how much, like, you know, inventory, when, you know, there was that period of months where the mills were only able to ship 30 or 40% of their quote unquote production. How much of that inventory build is still out there, or has it been rectified? And are there mill inventories kind of in line with historical?
I think mill inventories are growing right now in general. All over North America. And I'd say that, you know, it's not just lumber. Was it Target last week that canceled a bunch of orders for inbound shipments? I don't know. Maybe it was Walmart, one big retailer. So I think a lot of things have been bought that maybe aren't going to be needed now in the future, right? Because demand destruction that we keep talking about is starting to take effect. I mean, the Fed just came out again, reiterated recently that they're committed to higher rates and they want to slow down inflation. So that means consumer sales are going to slow down, and eventually it'll affect hiring. It'll affect, you know, other parts of the economy. We're just sort of the leading edge. You can see what's going to happen to the rest of the economy by observing what's happened to lumber the last 90 days.
That's it, Matt. Good point. Greg, maybe you got input to this. The Fed actually, I think they were almost walking back raises for a month and a half, and all of a sudden Powell came out and said that, and next thing you know, we're back into a sell-off in the market again, right? Which is basically reality, where inflation is still in front of us, even though you go to the store, maybe things have stopped going up. Maybe gas is a little bit cheaper at some places, but one thing for certain is lumber is less expensive right now.
I mean, here's the reality: is that the Fed's target is 2% inflation. Inflation right now is running somewhere between 6 and 8%. Has the rate of increase slowed? Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a long time for inflation to come back down. We're dealing with, you know, record year over year increases in the money supply and constraints on supply due to, I don't want to get political here because, you know, but because COVID policies made no sense there. So, you know, my best estimate is we may need to fire up Brian Westbury again to get some insight into this. But he's telling me that, you know, to get back to the Fed's target, you're going to have a protracted period of slower economic growth, and it's probably going to draw us well into the second half of next year. I sit here and I go, I tell people the worst is yet to come. To Matt's point, we'll bottom out before it gets that bad in a lot of other sectors, because Matt is right. We are the leading edge. I mean, well, we're not. Toilet paper was, right? Yeah. Toilet paper went up before lumber. Just remember that. That's that. I put that into one of my new, one of my new leading indicators.
Are we talking about the good toilet paper or the real cheap one? Because they produced some really cheap toilet paper during the pandemic, which
man, they were sending some sandpaper out there for a while.
Too much hardwood in the mix.
That's funny.
Kyle Little, great question here. When you say inventories are growing, isn't the difference today that the inventories that we are talking about are unsold inventories compared to the record sold inventories that the producers could not ship a quarter ago?
Yes,
that's true. But there's also sold inventories that are growing because of weather problems. So you have both. It's not one or the other. You can use the word "and" here.
Yeah, and Matt, you and I were talking.
Go ahead, Bash. I'm sorry.
Matt and I were talking, and maybe Greg. Matt, you had a good point. I just assumed a lot of the rail shipping was solved. You said that basically rail from where you sit at isn't any better than it was months ago.
It's never going to get solved, Ash. It's never solved
is a bad way to say, but it hasn't changed. So, but the point being that Matt had to be is if all of a sudden there's a big push to move lumber on rail, you can't move it real quick.
The go forward status quo is going to be the way it has been for the last 6 to 8 months and for some period of time. That you should just plan on that. And I mean, but I will say an interesting thing is I had a mill this week in the East that for months has been 2 to 3 weeks in shipment, and called me yesterday and said, here's the cars that I can load this week, which was like, kind of was a wow moment for me. Matt, maybe you can comment on this. I'm hearing some anecdotal talk, 2 things. One about contract cancellations.
Whoa.
In that people have contracts and they're saying, hey, we're just not going to need all of these cars between now and the end of the year. So we're going to, can you just suspend? I guess the suspension is the right word. We're going to suspend that volume.
Interesting. Right? Go back 6 months, Greg, and we were talking about how everybody was adding from their spot to their contracts, and we're just loading contracts up.
Have you heard? Have you seen? I mean, you've got a pretty good keen insight into that, I think.
I'm not going to say that it hasn't been asked of us, but I personally haven't been asked, and I don't know anybody in the room that has been asked. If they have been asked to slow down the contract flow of lumber, I haven't heard it in the room. We haven't talked about it in any of our sales meetings. I haven't gotten an email from anybody asking me that. So I'm completely unaware. That's the first I've heard of it. However, having you talk about it, it wouldn't surprise me if it has happened, right? Or will happen in the future. Because that's what happens. I mean, these contracts are even though they're contracts, they end up being flexible at times. So when the thing's really going gangbusters, you almost always get the phone call, hey, can you add to my contract? Hey, can you send me some extra wood? We just, 5 months ago, I was in my role as a salesperson. Part of my role as a salesperson was to make sure that, I was covering everybody to the best of my ability, which was hard to do because we were all having trouble sourcing lumber. Now that that's not the case, now that everybody can source lumber and you've got mills calling you saying, hey, I can load this week, and inventory is growing, whether that's inventories in the field or inventories at the site, our industry's slowing down, period. And the result of that is going to be higher inventories and slower rates of consumption. Everybody's turns are going down a little bit. So we're going to go back to a market that's more along the lines of 2015 to 2018. And the stats are going to back me up on this too. You'll watch. You'll see housing starts in the 1.1, 1.2 range here pretty soon. And that's where we were in 2015. That's exactly where we're heading right now.
Well, maybe that's what a great idea for the poll is in the next 6 months, what will be the low monthly seasonal housing start number? Great idea there, Matt. We'll get that poll out and have it for next week. See what everybody thinks.
So Dana Iverson was asking Matt, and I'm trying to think back if this was related to Matt, if a layoff occurs on the labor side, are those available to be rehired when they are needed? I think what you were talking about, Matt, that probably comes up to if you lay somebody off because of a curtailment. Maybe that was the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be a situation right now where I think in the short term, you would not lay people off. You would just pay them to not work, because right now today we're having trouble hiring.
I understand that's a trend though, paying people not to work.
Right.
I mean, everybody's into it.
I mean, we can't hire enough laborers to run our reload, where we have 25 acres of storage, a sort chain, a chop saw, and we load all of our rail cars for Tillamook and Warrenton out of. We're short 5 or 6 people, and we're paying incentives to hire, and we still can't get anybody. Maybe that needs to change. Maybe more labor will show up, and those jobs will get filled eventually. I don't know how the labor part of our economy right now is a real head scratcher. I mean, and it's not affecting just Hampton; it's affecting every business in America, right? Truck drivers, restaurants, supermarkets.
What do you think about this?
You name it.
What do you think about $22 an hour to work at fast food at McDonald's, California? How's that?
I wish I could do that. I got paid $3.50 an hour to work at McDonald's when I was 17 years old, and then they fired me because I kept not showing up because I had baseball games I was pitching in. I never told anybody.
Ken is saying U.S. North American energy advantage on natural gas, electricity, and oil versus EU, UK will drive marginal production here. John Bavister, John Hutchison Lumber, Iowa, welcome having you on here. What does an even dollar euro exchange do to the East Coast market? I mean, so there's always this thing where if Europeans have a high cost of production, it's not going to come over here. Have you noticed any less euro coming over, Greg, or same amount, more?
The maximum amount of euro that all of the ports and the shipping lines can handle will be hitting an East Coast and Gulf port near you in the next 60 to 90 days. Demand in Europe is zero, absolute zero. And those mills have, in order to run efficiently, they have to run full out. And the only place, the Asian market is worse in terms of price return. So I see no slowdown, and I mean, there's going to be some. It could get ugly in October.
Where you're saying there could be, so whatever vessel space is available, they're going to put wood on it and ship and point it this direction.
Right. When they've added vessel space for the fourth quarter, it's really a function of how much the ports can handle. That's the limiting amount of how much wood. And as you've seen, we've added additional ports that they're shipping lumber to over the last. I think
the reason for that could be too, Greg, is some ports are just almost impossible to do lumber business with. I had some loads in some of those. It's
actually, we have some experience with that.
You do that once and go like, I'm never putting wood in that port again.
Yeah,
we all know who they are, so we'll just remain nameless.
Ken was asking, does the November contract have a 2 or 3 handle on it soon?
Oh gosh, Ken.
Yeah.
I don't even want to go there with that kind of a thing, but
not there's. I'm going to say no. You don't have to worry about going to a 2 handle. You'd have to go sub-million housing starts in the next 60 days for that to even have a chance. But and my big wild card is, and I had this discussion today, is look at futures, and until that's a premium to the cash market, that's one of the signals that will tell you that we're getting closer to a bottom. Notice what I said. It's one of, and it's closer. It's neither one of those are definitive, but that's something that, I look for as a signal. Go, oh, maybe things are different because, January's $40 or $50 over today's cash market.
And where's Nova?
480. Stand by.
481.60.
Okay.
481.60. Yeah. January's 505. September's 510. Cash market today, Matt, is, what do you think? 500 bid?
Yes.
500 bid?
Yeah, I think if you, yeah.
520 print.
High 400s. Yep.
Yeah. And the one thing I will say is it's interesting is that Eastern spruce numbers are all higher than historical relative to Western spruce. And I'm trying to reconcile that as part of why my question was like the relative slowness in West Texas and Western markets versus East Coast. I'm trying to reconcile.
I've heard, and I can't prove it because I don't deal there, but I've heard that the New England area and the Northeast in general, that corridor has been relatively busy, and a lot of activity, a lot of swinging of hammers, and a lot of construction activity going on. A buddy of mine was just in Boston. His son got accepted at Harvard. I'm sure he's really proud for his son. I know I'm proud on his behalf. Anyone that's got a kid accepted at Harvard from California, that's a pretty big deal, right? But he flew back there last week to drop his son off at the dorms as a freshman, and said Boston's humming. Just there's all kinds of activity over there. So,
Yeah, I was just there a couple of weeks ago, and it's.
Was that true?
I think that I think that everywhere is pretty busy with the stuff that's in the pipeline and was going right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think you may be onto something. Maybe northern markets, Northeast, Midwest, looking at the calendar, are just really busy here. They tend to be more like middle market and smaller builders as opposed to heavily dominated by big national builders. And those are the people. Those are the people
that one of your older inventories of homes, right? Older ages of homes. And there's a lot of repair and remodel going on right now, especially as people move out of more urban to more of a suburban area. I can speak from where we live, Greg. You can't go up and down any street without seeing some kind of remodeling going on. I can only imagine the upgrades of some of the places in the Northeast. I'll have to watch some more episodes of This Old House to see what those boys are doing over there, digging out those stone foundations and putting some mansions up, right?
There you go.
Kyle was saying he would concur with Greg's comments on shipments headed to U.S. ports over the next 60 to 90 days. So as a buyer out there, if you know how to time those shipments when they hit, who the person is that's actually involved in the euro and how they price it, you can time that to, because there's some groups out there that just want to spin it before it even hits and clip their coupon, right? And that's when they could load up on it. Does that make sense, Greg?
Yeah, I'm curious. You guys, how long is the Ukraine war? When did that start? February? January?
March.
Okay, mm-hmm. So I remember having a conversation with a buddy of mine that's he's an importer. And he was telling me at that moment when that war started, the Europeans need all the lumber, and there's going to be a lack of lumber coming in from Europe in the remaining of this quarter and then into the third quarter. Well, now we go, it's been what? March was, so yeah, it's been 5 months. In 5 months, look at what's changed in terms of what we're just talking about. The European market is dead, according to Greg, and I have no reason not to believe you. And all of a sudden, there's lots of euro heading towards the North America in the fourth quarter. So whatever policies that the Fed has adopted, it sure is working, and whatever side effects from the Ukraine-Russia war that we thought might occur have the opposite direction. Does that make sense? Am I reading that wrong?
No, I mean, one of the things was that it had like all the contracts that were in place in March, the sanctions let all the existing contracts. And so that stuff kind of ran out through July. I mean, I think Random Lengths just put out a number and about, the drop in Russian imports in the second quarter. And you'll see more further drop on Russian imports in the third quarter. But that does have some effect on some producers. But I mean, in the aggregate, I don't
What's
think
going on
I don't
with
think,
Europe?
I think the slowing demand in Europe was a bigger
So
issue.
what's causing the slowing demand in Europe? Because Europe was humming there for the longest time, just like us. So what's going on in Europe that we maybe don't know about?
The war in Ukraine and their energy prices are up exponentially above ours, right? I mean, I guess the big story will be, will lumber producers stop making lumber so that they can just burn it for fuel this winter?
Well, it's
Wow.
funny, a lot of those, when you go to the big boxes and you see those pellets of
Pallets of pellets?
pellets of firewood. A lot of it is KD spruce SPF out of Europe that they kill and dry and ship it over here as firewood. It's for us to burn, is for pleasure.
Yeah, well, they were not going to be sending any more of that. They'll be burning it themselves.
Yeah.
Matt, to your point, I just, it's kind of like one of the things that I always, I struggle with is the unintended consequences of actions. And so often when I'm looking at the markets, there's a knee-jerk reaction to look at something that happens and, think that that's going to produce this outcome. But, so often it's something completely different. And, I guess that's
the law of unintended consequences. Is that what you're talking about?
That's the art part of this business, is looking at, the unintended consequences and how that's going to impact our markets. Cause it's always that, the unseen thing that changes the underlying narrative that drives prices. And I mean, I think to your point right now, we need to really go, okay, what is that underlying narrative that everybody's operating under that is forming their decisions about the market, and what could be different? And I'm clearly in the seek to understand mode on that.
So, quick, Matt, you brought a good point up, back to the markets of 2015 and so forth. A lot of these trading floors, distribution, have built up and hired over the last 3 years. And a lot of people have been in this industry for the 3 of the best years to be in the industry, but especially if you were selling and buying lumber, right?
Sure.
You and Greg have both been through where you and I have called each other asking us, why are we even in this business? Right? Sometimes.
Sure. Right.
So what's your advice, and what do you think is going to people that have been through this 3 years, but now they're going into the unknown? What can they expect?
Well, I think you just have to operate with less. Less is more is the attitude that I have right now. So in terms of my inventory that I'm willing to speculate on, the stuff that I put on the ground is going to be a lower number, not just dollar amounts, but volume, because that's what the market is telling me, right? I don't need to carry, let's say I want to carry 50 cars, maybe I only need to carry 30 cars. I don't need to carry as big a position because I don't have as many people clamoring for the material. And I think there's also going to be less of a premium for having on the spot cash trucks as we move forward. For years, Ashley, you and I, okay, not talking about some friend of mine here. I'm talking about you and I. traded trucks at car prices to move inventory.
Below
Right?
car, it was crazy.
Yeah,
I remember
we've done that. We have done
Yeah.
that in our and when that is the case, you don't want inventory, right? There is no point in investing in inventory if all you're going to do is turn around and sell it for the car price delivered. You've just lost all your margin, all your cost of handling, all the it is a pain in the butt to manage inventory correctly, as you know. And when you put one on the ground 2,000 miles away from where your sales office is, you better have some quality people there that you trust to work on your behalf to make sure that problems don't develop in terms of how you're handling the inventory and turning the inventory and what you ship and what you receive.
When I was at my previous company, I was explaining to the guys when I was first there about how truckloads trade historically at a discount. And they were like, why would you do that?
Right. Why would you do what? You just answered your own question. Why would you do that? You
like, and I would say to them is this can go on for years like this. So what you need to do is add value to why you do it. If you're just somebody that wants to buy a whole bunch of cars, put them on the ground and sell them with no expertise or value to add, that's a tough one. Greg,
Yeah.
what's your that's great input, Matt. What's your thought?
My advice is the best time to start saving your money was 3 years ago, and the next best time to save your money is today. And to Matt's point, I think it's lowered expectations and much more conservative, much more conservative trading style for sure.
Yeah, no. Bavister was asking, John was asking, so with the East Coast needs filled by Europe, that will push Eastern Canadian stock into the Midwest and eat up Western SPF market share with lower prices. And 16s back to a random lengths discount. 400, here we come, question mark.
I fully agree. 100%. I think you just nailed it. Why are we even on the show? Let's just get John on here.
Yeah, we should.
We'll get. Yeah, great idea.
John is going to be filling in for me next week, guys. Okay.
Kyle was saying wood pellet price rate of return is now 4x from previous year and already more than any downfall low grade SPF. Agreed. Current trend is putting it north of the equivalent of foreign delivered Eastern U.S. port. This can create some challenges for shipments for late Q22 and Q1 23 shipments.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing that I was talking to somebody today about is, when you look at the dynamics of the market, look at the relative performance of low grade lumber versus high grade lumber and how, where it was trading, like tight. And it wasn't that long ago where there was a lot of cases you could ship number 2 on number 3 orders. And now, economy and number 3 prices have fallen much more dramatically.
Well, that's usually used to always say, Greg, and you could tell the top of a market when all the prices come together and the bottom when all the prices come together, right?
I say a lot of things, Ashley,
That's actually a pretty astute observation, really, if you think about it. I think when all the prices come together really marks like goalposts, high and low. That's a good marker for change.
Yep. When the filet mignon is trading at the same prices as a rump roast.
When things are really good and mills can ship premium to cover 2 and better orders, they will, and when things are really bad and mills are forced to ship 2 and better to cover number 3 orders, then they will.
What do we think about home center business? I saw that treaters in the South are particularly slow. What's your sense on the home center business on your end, Matt?
It's completely the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah,
we just did a deal on a bunch of green lumber for treating here just yesterday. So, and that was by request from a treater. And actually is good for us because it takes less kiln time, obviously, if you don't have to run it through the kiln. So that makes it easier for us to produce. So that's what
Yeah,
the
no,
other
no,
thing
I
that
was
happened
thinking
is
more
our
about, like,
weekly
your
our
home center
weekly
business.
consumption on the home center business. I'm getting there. I'm just slow.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
But the home center business was at a high level again, higher than average last week. I'm not going to tell you the number, but it was higher than average. And it would have been even higher still had we not missed 2 days of shipping because of a glitch in the matrix in terms of our software. So, you know, home center, treating business, that segment of the market is perfectly fine over here. In fact, better than fine, especially for this time of year. And this is the time of year when you get into September and October, you're kind of hitting Main Street USA time of the year for that segment of the market. That's prime time, right? That's the spring season and the fall season, the two biggest seasons for that segment. Multifamily remains good. It's really what we're talking about mostly when we talk about the negative things that are going on here is to do with single family and single family related businesses. So that's the bulk of our market. I mean, that's what consumes the most of the lumber we talk about every time. So
I think one of the interesting things about the home centers is the amount of pro business they picked up over the pandemic. And one, because they were trying to get it, and two, they got it. And what they consider pro business, and I'm repeating what a friend of mine told me in the Pacific Northwest, that pro business to them is somebody that goes in and buys something to consume that's not being used in their own house, right? And
like a remodeler or a guy that's doing like 20
and
custom homes a year.
The volume that I heard, the pro business they picked up was amazing. I mean, and they continue to do that. And now they're opening these big distribution centers that are going to cater just to big pro builders and dealers. So I think when we talk home centers now, that's going to continue to just build and build and build as they go into not just the person throwing it over to put in their minivan 2 sticks of lumber. We're talking about things to repair, remodel of homes and build homes, right?
My guess is the people that own those companies right now that they're competing with will find a way to fight back.
Yeah, no doubt.
There's going to be some competition.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's going to be it's going to get bloody, buddy, because that is.
Have you heard that though, Matt? Am I wrong?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong at all.
And part of that, Ash, is how much more, there was two things. There was a period of time where, there's some places said, no, we can't supply you because, they were taking care of their preferred customers or they didn't have enough allocation of certain products, right? Yeah. So the only alternative was to go to a home center. And then the other side of that is their price. We've talked about this before. Their prices adjust lower much more quickly than the pro dealer based on their inventory, right?
It's a good. That's two.
So those two things, those are the two things that I see as having contributed to that.
I know of home builders, large ones, that have taken their first test shipments out of some of these big facilities to try to see how it works. So
the one thing we know that's constant is change. The other thing that I know that is true is that we are way over our time allotment, and I'd like to say for all of you that have stayed with us today, we appreciate your support and your patience. Just a quick plug: we've got an upcoming announcement. Ashley, you want to talk to us about it?
Yeah, we'll have an announcement out tomorrow. We're doing a little soft opening of the exchange today. So if you go to it, the users, you can list the buy and sell. And tomorrow we'll come out with a press announcement and kind of show you what we got going on. Pretty exciting stuff.
It's gonna be exciting. Yeah. Congrats, and we'll look forward to a lot of good things on MX, changing the world digitally one day at a time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you,